This time, Islamic Secrets will reveal an amazing natural phenomenon that succeeded in bringing the scientist to Islam. This interesting phenomenon occurred among scientists who discovered Islamic guidance after conducting research. The scientist conducted research on plants and succeeded in finding answers through verses from the Koran. This is what aroused his admiration and belief in Islam. In a scientific study reported by a well-known science magazine, the Journal of Plant Molecular Biologists, it was stated that a group of scientists conducting research found subtle sounds coming out of some plants that were not usually heard by ordinary ears. The sound was successfully saved and recorded with the most sophisticated recording device ever available. Scientists have been researching this astonishing phenomenon for almost 3 years and have succeeded in analyzing the sound pulses or pulses so that they become electrical light signals using a tool called an oscilloscope. Finally, the scientists were able to witness the pulse of electric light repeating itself more than 1,000 times in 1 second. Professor William Brown, who led scientific experts to study this phenomenon, indicated after the results were achieved that there was no scientific interpretation of this phenomenon. Even though the professor admitted that his party had submitted the results of their research to universities and research centers in America and Europe, all of them were unable to interpret this phenomenon. In fact, everyone was stunned and didn't know what to say. On the last occasion, this phenomenon was confronted and studied by experts from Britain, and among them there was a Muslim scientist from India. After 5 days of conducting research and studies, it turned out that the scientists from England raised their hands. The Muslim scientists said, "We Muslims know the interpretation and meaning of this phenomenon, even since 1400 years ago." So the scientists present were shocked by this statement and asked desperately to show the interpretation and meaning of this incident. The Muslim scientist immediately quoted the word of Allah in the Qur'an, Surah Al-Isra, verse 44. "The 7 heavens, the earth, and everything in them always glorify Allah. There is nothing except always glorifying Him by praising Him, but you do not understand their tasbih. Indeed, He is the most forgiving, the most forgiving." The Muslim scientist explained that the pulsing sound was the prayer beads of plants that form the lafads of Allah, as seen on the oscilloscope screen. So silence and extraordinary astonishment filled the hall where the Muslim scientist spoke. Finally, the person responsible for this research, namely Professor William Brown, met the Muslim scientist to discuss the religion wrought by the Prophet Muhammad regarding this phenomenon. So the Muslim scientist explained to him about Islam. After that, he presented the Koran and its translation to Professor William Brown. A few days after that, Professor William held a lecture at Carnegie Mellon University. He said, "In my life, I have never encountered a phenomenon like this in 30 years of this work, and not a single scientist from those who did carry out studies that are able to interpret what this phenomenon means. Likewise, no natural event has ever been found that can interpret it. However, the only interpretation that we can find is in the Koran. This left me no other choice but to say, I bear witness that there is no true God but Allah, and that Muhammad is His servant and messenger." This professor had announced his Islam in front of a stunned audience. It is not only about plants that have tasbih that are mentioned in the Quran, and also everything that exists on this earth that lives in pairs is also mentioned in the Quran. In the Quran, it is clearly stated that all creatures created by Allah have their own partners. This is proof of the balance of the universe which was created and exists in His care. In Surah Ad-Zariyat verse 49, Allah says, "And we created everything in pairs so that you would remember the greatness of Allah." According to this verse, the creatures that Allah created in pairs were not only humans, but also all types of creatures. There are male and female animals. There are also male and female plants, even living and inanimate objects. In the world of science, every creature that was created in pairs was only discovered in the 19th century. A scientist from England, Paul Dirac, in his research succeeded in discovering matter that was created in pairs. His discovery, called parate, states that all objects in the universe, down to the smallest particles that are invisible to the naked eye, apparently have a partner. With the results of his studies, he received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1933. In fact, when the Qur'an was revealed 14 centuries ago, the Qur'an clearly mentioned this theory in Surah Yasin verse 36. Glory be to God who has created couples, all from what the earth grows, and from themselves, and from anything else. What they don't know. There are many verses in the Koran that explain objects in pairs. For example, Allah always strings together the words life and death and repeats them in the Quran 145 times. Good and bad actions are repeated 167 times. Allah mentions the world and is followed by his counterpart, the afterlife, 115 times. Allah also mentions angels and devils 88 times, benefits and losses 50 times, hardship and patience 114 times, men and women 24 times, disaster and gratitude 75 times, and so on. In the past, humans did not know that plants also have male and female partners like animals. It was botany in the modern era that revealed the existence of male and female types in plants. In botany, it is clearly stated that every plant consists of a male and a female. In fact, plants that have both sexes at the same time, unisexual, have both elements with clear differences between male and female. Regarding this, in fact, the Koran has long talked about it in Surah Taha verse 53. Allah says, "And he sent down water from the sky, so we brought it out in pairs from plants of various colors and tastes. Then the word of Allah in the letter aroused, and of all fruits he made them in pairs." Modern research states that fruit is the final product of the breeding system of high-ranking plants. The stage before becoming a fruit is a flower, which has male organs, stamens, and female organs, ovules. If the dust is carried to a flower, it becomes a fruit, which will ripen and release its seeds. Therefore, all fruits show the presence of both male and female organs. Not only animals and plants, but also the smallest particles that ever existed, such as atoms, are also paired. Like electrical power, atoms contain electrons, positive ions, and protons, negative ions. The scientists who first discovered ions were German physicists, Julius Elster and Hans Friedrich Geitel. In 1899, ions are atoms that have a negative or positive charge. Atoms are composed of neutrons, which have a neutral charge, protons, which are positive, and electrons, which are negative. Neutrons and protons are in the center, which is the atomic nucleus, while electrons rotate around the atomic nucleus in their orbits, energy levels. Miraculously, the number of positive and negative charges on an atom is always equal, so that the atom has no charge. However, for some reason, some electrons can leave the atom, which are called free electrons. If an atom loses a free electron, it turns into a positive ion. Conversely, it will become a negative ion if it accepts free electrons. These ions are unstable and tend to look for partners to bond with.